Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles Insider text service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today we're going to discuss what else? New Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni. Chris, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing all right. It took a long while to get here, it seems like, but it looks like the Eagles finally have their head coach, and still undecided. I mean, how you doing?
Well, I think I got a feeling that this was going to happen when I got a text message Tuesday night about how the meeting went. So I was told, to give you a little bit of insight, Nick Sirianni was called really last minute. I believe it was Monday night, actually, and he was in the area. They met with him. He really knocked them off their socks with some of his coaching suggestions. It seemed like he was really in the thick of this, even though being a late candidate. He was calling around to potential coaching staff members immediately after the interview. So that normally doesn't happen. And then they liked him so much after, I believe it was 6 hours, a 6-hour conversation with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. They welcomed him back on Wednesday, even though they were interviewing Dennis Allen that day. And this became very, very real. This was somebody who really nailed his interview, kind of blew them away. He was also, he's Frank Reich's pupil. Worked with him in Indy for 3 years as his offensive coordinator. Before that, he was his quarterbacks coach with Phillip Rivers with the Chargers. And look, the Eagles like familiarity. They like working with people who have worked with people that they know. They clearly have a lot of respect for Frank Reich and his offense. The Colts averaged over 28 points a game last year. We all know that the Eagles only averaged 20.9 points per game this past season. And look, they wanted to take a shot on a guy who they felt could develop long term. This was not a for now hire, in my opinion. I think this is a long term grow with your quarterback, grow with your young roster sort of move. And they're going to have to be patient with him. This can't be one of those impatient, like, give him 2 years and then he's out of the building sort of things. They need to really kind of, now that they've made this move, they really need to see where this goes. This is a guy who's never called plays before, even though he was very heavily involved in the play calling in San Diego, Los Angeles, and Indianapolis. He's a guy who's very well connected in the league, has played under a lot of really successful head coaches. And he kind of has his own kind of trajectory through the NFL, where he's coached under Todd Haley, Romeo Crennel, Mike McCoy, Anthony Lynn, and Frank Reich. So that's 5 guys. That's pretty informative, especially when you are trying to craft your own design on things. You had a great piece about getting to know him. Kind of take us through his background a little bit.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, he did start out at Mount Union as a wide. He was actually a decent wide receiver. It was all Ohio Valley Conference while he was there. He played a little. I'd never heard of this league before, but the Atlantic Indoor Football League, and he played a little time there. But then he started to ascend his way up. He went back to Mount Union, became a assistant there. Then he went over to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, spent some time as a wide receivers coach there. And then he really got noticed by Haley and became a offensive quality control coach. And you start to see that trajectory, like you mentioned. He starts to go from there. Then he goes over to San Diego, and then next he goes to the Colts. He works with Phillip Rivers. I really think if there's any bright spot that you really could see with this hire is what he did with the wide receivers there. I mean, he had a rookie Mike Williams, and he also had a Keenan Allen there. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, Keenan Allen makes his first Pro Bowl during that season. He coaches him, and Mike Williams had a good rookie season. So you have that, and then he went over to Indianapolis Colts with Frank Reich. He went with Frank Reich over to Indianapolis, and all of a sudden he became the offensive coordinator. That's his guy. That's the guy he's molded, his protege, and comes from a coaching family. His brother coaches Washington Jefferson College. His dad and his brother coached at Southwestern Central, which is Sirianni's high school as well too. So it's in the blood. I mean, I think that's why everybody talks about a coach's son. He really personifies that in a way, I guess, when it comes to the position where he's at today. I think that experience definitely helped him out when it came to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people around the league, including former Saints and Dolphins GM Randy Mueller, who served as the senior advisor for the Chargers for a lot of years. He was a head executive there. He says that Nick's a really genuine guy. His approach is very genuine. He says that his players are always prepared. He said that when players don't pan out, it's typically because they don't know what they're doing. And he said the great thing about Nick is he's able to teach in a way that you always feel like the players are prepared. And I think that that's a really cool sentiment from an executive. I spoke to somebody who's worked with him in the past who said the guy's very special because he knows how to identify strengths as opposed to focusing on the totality of a player or his weaknesses. Called him very energetic. I spoke with his brother who just said this is a guy who's going to work his butt off. He was working 20-hour days as an assistant, and now it's kind of paid off. I spoke to his college quarterback who just said the guy is just the consummate competitor who wants to just do right by his teammates and play well. So he's a guy that is really admired in kind of all walks of his life. And I think, it's not really surprising when you talk to people around the league that he nailed this interview. Was he a sleeper candidate? Absolutely. Did he come out of kind of nowhere? Yeah, of course. Most people listening to this podcast hadn't heard of him a week ago. I knew the name. I really didn't know a ton about him before I kind of did some digging. And look, I think a lot of people were split on Josh McDaniels. There were people that were trying to talk themselves into him, and he was the ace in the hole until this interview on Tuesday. And I think the Eagles may have dodged a bullet, to be honest with you, based on my conversations with people that have worked with McDaniels in the past. I found it alarming that a lot of New England Patriots, former New England Patriots players, did not return my calls. I spoke to Brandon Stokely, who was with him in Denver, and he said that it was the one time in his career where he kind of felt negativity. He called him Hurricane Josh. So, look, I think when you're looking at a retread who bombed as hard as Josh did in Denver, and who really didn't do a great job last year when he didn't have Tom Brady, I think there's an understanding or there's a deserved skepticism about him. Do I think he deserves a second shot? Yes. But I think I would have probably preferred it had Howie Roseman been dismissed as well, and this was a clean slate team. I would have said Josh McDaniels should be the hire. But if you're going to keep Howie Roseman around and you believe in Howie Roseman, that's the reason why you're keeping him, then it makes sense to have a more collaborative process, because I can tell you people in the league thought that a Josh McDaniels Howie Roseman marriage was going to end really poorly. And while there are some people that really want to move on from Howie Roseman, you don't really want that type of clash in your organization, no matter what it leads to. And so, look, maybe Sirianni was the safe hire. Maybe Sirianni was a guy who they felt like they could oversee pretty well because he doesn't have a ton of clout. But I will tell you, people in the league know that he is extremely assertive, extremely competitive, and I don't think he's just going to be a pushover, as some fans have maybe kind of put that out there. I saw Emmanuel Acho called him a potential puppet. I don't see that. I do see why people think that they went with a guy with a lack of clout so that they could control him. But I think they're going to try to put a really, really good staff around him of veteran coaches. And I think that'll kind of negate that whole power structure sort of thing. I wanted to talk to you about what this means for the quarterback position, because to me, this is Carson Wentz's first big win since October. Like, to me, you're hiring this guy with the thought process of he's a former quarterbacks coach. He's a former wide receivers coach. He's been with Frank Reich, Carson's mentor. he calls a pretty similar offense, and the terminology is very similar to what Reich used here. It just kind of seems like this was a tailor-made hire for Carson Wentz. Now, I have an issue with that, and we'll talk about that later. But is that the vibe you got as well?
Well, yeah, I feel it is, and that I personally think that's not the right thing to do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, this guy supposedly is a quarterback whisperer, especially with his past with a quarterback being a quarterback's coach. I think they really did this for Wentz, and now when you look at Jalen Hurts, now you got to wonder what's going through his mind. I mean, you went ahead, you drafted this guy with the second round pick, and in last year's draft, and now you're sitting there looking like, all right, do you trade him? I mean, he played decently. You got to think that some people want to kind of inquire at least to see what's going on for there. And then if he comes back, I mean, you got to make sure that he stays healthy, because you probably won't have Nate Sudfeld. I mean, if Nate Sudfeld comes back, I'll be shocked after the way everything ended here, and also just him being on silence. He probably wants a shot to start somewhere. Which, good luck to him. But when it comes to, I mean, I don't think we've seen the last of Jalen Hurts. If they decide to keep him, there's still different ways that the Eagles can go ahead and use him. I mean, Sirianni in the Colts, what they did was they used Jacoby Brissett in a way where they brought him in on short yardage packages. They brought him near the goal line, and similar to what we saw what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts early in the year, they went ahead, they ran a version of zone read. They have some different passes they can run off of that as well too. So there are things they can do with it. Hopefully, if they do decide to stick with Hurts, they can go ahead and actually be a little bit more creative instead of just going, okay, here's zone read. We know what's coming around. Okay, he ran his zone read, get him off and put Carson back in. But if I'm the Eagles, I mean, I really think that there's a severe possibility they may move on from him just to make Wentz happy. I mean, they did the coach. I mean, what if he goes now to the front office and says, hey, I feel better now, and I want this guy gone. Or they do that as well too. They just put themselves in a bad situation here.
So I want to talk about this because I actually kind of like the hire. I just don't like the process, right? I think when you're looking at what this team really needs, it's not just the offense. It's not just the one quarterback that needs to be fixed. This is a complete rebuild. It's just a need to fix everything here. And that's why you've got to be able to surround yourself with a good staff. Maybe that's why they liked him, because they felt like he was bringing a senior staff member that could fix the defensive side of the ball. I was told that he reached out to some veteran defensive coordinators. I don't know if that's what he's inevitably going to do, but this team needs like a complete overhaul, not just from a roster standpoint, but from a culture and a coaching standpoint. And I think my issue is if you're only doing this to really benefit one player, you're doing it wrong. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say they only believed in Sirianni because he could fix their now thrice invested quarterback in Carson Wentz, a guy who we're not actually sure if he's going to be the guy in a year. But they have to, in order to make this decision, they had to look at this as an overarching thing, and I'm not sure that they did. What's your take on that?
I think, yeah, I think they would have just focused on a one thing, and that was it, and they didn't take into account, the whole entire defense. I mean, he's going to have. I agree that they're going to have to go ahead and get a lot of veteran coaches around him, especially being a first time head coach, similar to what Jim Schwartz was to Doug Peterson. They're going to have to do that, but this decision just reeks of, okay, we have to fix one thing, and then we'll just let the chips fall where they may with the other stuff. And another thing now you have to question is, now when you start looking at staff, which type of defense are they going to stick with? Are they going to stick with a 4-3, or are they going to go with a 3-4? And if you get a 3-4, you're going to have to go ahead and invest a lot more resources into a position that they've always turned a blind eye to or didn't value as much. I mean, you can use Graham. Graham has experience playing outside linebacker in a system like that, and we haven't seen Derek Barnett. Can he play in something like that? So there's so many questions now that come on that side of the ball, I mean, they've looked offense. They're going to have to get a head coach caliber defensive coordinator. I mean, and this is all speculation, but I mean, just me. We saw that Wade Phillips said, "Hey, you know what? He's itching to get back in the game. Do they try to reach out to him if they really feel like they want to go to a 3-4, or do they go ahead and try to find a guy?" My guy Steve Wilkes, who just joined up with Missouri, so he's off the table. But they're going to have to try to find a way. I like your story as well too. Gunnerman, the defensive backs coach in Indianapolis, I think that's a really good name as well too. So
yeah, Jonathan Gannon.
Gannon, yeah. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, look, I think he needs to surround himself with at least 2 former head coaches. That's where I'm at. I just did a story projecting his potential staff. I had Gannon as his defensive coordinator. I had Phipp staying as a special teams coordinator. But I also had Jim Caldwell as his offensive coordinator. They don't have a lot of connections, but that's something that I think the team would want to put on him. I had Mike McCoy, who was his head coach that he worked under with the Chargers as his quarterbacks coach. I also had Anthony Lynn as the running backs coach / assistant head coach. If you're going to replace Deuce Staley, and as you wrote yesterday, that it's probably time for Deuce to move on, you've got to do it with a name, because you've got a young kid in Miles Sanders who really needs to learn the ropes and improve himself. And look, Anthony Lynn wasn't as wasn't as successful on offense as Deuce was during his career, but he was around some really talented running backs. He's been a head coach. He has clout. He's played in the league, and I think that would make a lot of sense. I think there's this sense that the Eagles are going with this youth movement and this rebuild, but that doesn't mean that their staff has to reflect that way. As a matter of fact, I would say their staff needs to really have a lot of experience. I'm interested to see what happens with Jeff Stoutland. Doug Marrone, the former Jags coach who I used to cover, accepted the Alabama job that he was rumored to be interested in. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, hiring the young guy leaves a lot of room for really intriguing coaching staff members. I'm not sure Josh McDaniels is going to take a lot of guys from New England. So there's that. I was also told that the Eagles had a lot of interest in Kellen Moore. And so I think that their outlook was to bring in someone young and bring in somebody who was new and could follow that kind of Andy Reid model. And I think that was the right way to go. So give me your final thoughts on this, Chris. What is your feeling? I know you said you're kind of up in the air, but give me your overall thoughts as we move into the first week of the Sirianni era.
I think when everything looks back, I think people are going to wish they kept Doug Peterson. I really think that Deuce Staley was the one that really should have gotten this job even for a little bit. And I think Sirianni, he's going to have to go ahead and win over that locker room very quickly, because he had a lot of current players in there vouching for Deuce, and he's going to have to show that he's the right guy for the job. But if not, it could get real interesting really quickly in there, especially if you start hearing about the stuff that, he's their guy, and especially he was the one that they hired just for Wentz, it seems like. So it's going to get real interesting if he can't prove himself that he can actually do the job.
So here's what I'll say to that. While I agree Deuce should have been a main option, I do think this team has this mindset of being too loyal to the past, for better or worse. We've seen that with players. We've seen that with coaches. I think it's time, just with the way that last season went, they need to have a full-on reworking. Now, would Howie Roseman be part of that? Ideally, yes, but they've already made the decision that he's not. So you've got to roll with the punches. I think there will be some position coaches who are kept, but I'm not sure that this is going to be a coaching staff that we can clearly recognize as longtime observers of this team. So with that said, make sure you sign up for Eagles Extra, 14 days free trial. We're doing Q&As every Friday. Chris will handle the one on this week at noon. I think what's great about Eagles Extra as these coaching candidates come in and we get all this news, you're going to get that right to your phone. You can avoid the clutter of social media and we'll get it right to you. You can have conversations with us. You can get in-depth analysis. We had a lot on Sirianni before he was hired, by the way, exclusive to Eagles Extra. So make sure you sign up for that. Eagles Extra at NJ.com/text. Also, make sure you download the No Huddle Show podcast wherever podcasts are available. We like creating noise in your head. You know what I mean? So for Chris, I'm Mike. Thanks for tuning in. We will talk to you very, very soon.